This is breaking news. I don't need you to understand it all. All I need you to know is that California has dropped the pursuit of advanced clean fleets rule. So what the heck am I talking about here, right? So basically, when you looked at this CARB rule, they wanted all vehicles, passenger vehicles by 2035 to be zero emission, and for all diesel trucks to be zero emission by 2045. They don't think Trump's going to go for this.
We'll quickly become energy independent.
Did you hear what just happened? CARB, the California Air Resources Board, has dropped its ambitious plan to phase out diesel trucks and push for zero-emission fleets by 2045. This is the same agency known for setting some of the toughest environmental rules in the country, and now they've done a complete 180. What does this shocking move mean for the trucking industry and the fight for cleaner air?
The California Air Resources Board, or CARB, voted 10-2 to pass the new fuel regulations. The goal of the program is to continue reducing fossil fuels.
Have you ever heard of CARB? It stands for California Air Resources Board, and if you're in California or the trucking business, it's a name you've probably come across. CARB is like the state's air quality watchdog. Their job is to regulate emissions and make sure the air Californians breathe is as clean as possible. Sounds like a noble cause, right? Well, CARB has always been a bit of an overachiever in this department. Their environmental policies are known for being some of the strictest in the country, sometimes even tougher than the Federal Environmental Protection Agency rules. They've always prided themselves on leading the way when it comes to climate initiatives, often setting the bar for other states to follow. Now, let's talk about their Advanced Clean Fleets rule. This was CARB's ambitious plan to transition all passenger vehicles to zero emissions by 2035 and phase out diesel trucks entirely by 2045. It was a huge undertaking, and they had some pretty aggressive deadlines along the way. For instance, they wanted trucking companies to start making major changes as early as 2032. But here's the thing, this wasn't just about clean air. It was about money, technology, and feasibility. Many people in the trucking industry raised concerns. Switching to electric or zero-emission trucks isn't cheap. Small businesses in particular feared they'd be priced out of the game. And then there were practical issues. Could the infrastructure keep up? Would there be enough charging stations or affordable electric cars available in time? These questions created a lot of friction, making CARB's dream feel more like a nightmare for the trucking community.
California has now withdrawn its stricter emission rules for trains and semi-trucks after the EPA failed to approve them. The California Air Resources Board's rules.
But California's commitment to climate change isn't new. They've always been ahead of the curve, leading the way for strict emission standards even when the rest of the country lagged. Over the years, CARB's approach has been influenced by who's sitting in the White House. Some administrations backed them up, while others, well, didn't. Their journey has been a roller coaster, and 2025 feels like the latest twist in the ride. Here's where things get wild. Just when everyone thought CARB was doubling down on their zero-emission goals, they dropped a bombshell. They're backing off from the Advanced Clean Fleets rule. Yep, you heard that right. The same agency that's been a champion for clean air and tough emission standards suddenly announced they were pulling the plug on one of their biggest initiatives. It's the kind of news that makes you stop and think, wait, what just happened? So what led to this shocking decision? According to CARB leadership, the decision wasn't made lightly. In their official statements, they explained that the political and economic landscape has changed dramatically. They were gearing up to push this rule forward under the Biden administration, which had been fully supportive of clean energy initiatives. But with Trump back in office, the game has changed. Trump has been very vocal about rolling back environmental regulations, and CARB saw the writing on the wall. Instead of fighting a losing battle, they decided to withdraw the rule. The timing of this decision also speaks volumes. CARB knew that Trump's administration would likely block their plans, so they opted to recalibrate. It's like they decided to retreat so they could live to fight another day.
Had included bans on new diesel-powered semi-trucks by 2036 and a ban on trains more than 23 years old by 2030.
But make no mistake, this decision wasn't just about politics. The economic pressures and industry pushback played a role too. Many businesses have been struggling with the idea of transitioning to zero-emission fleets. The cost, the logistics, and the sheer scale of the charge were overwhelming. CARB's withdrawal feels like an acknowledgement of these realities. This announcement has left the trucking industry in a whirlwind. Some are celebrating, relieved they won't have to overhaul their fleets just yet. Others are worried about what this means for California's fight against air pollution. Either way, it's a move that's got everyone talking. When CARB announced they were dropping the Advanced Clean Fleets rule, the trucking industry let out a collective sigh of relief. For many drivers and fleet owners, this decision felt like a lifeline. Imagine Imagine working for years to build your business, investing in diesel trucks, and then being told you'd have to replace them all with expensive electric ones. It's no wonder this news was such a game changer. People can now breathe a little easier knowing they won't have to make these massive changes anytime soon. For some, it means more time to plan for the future. For others, it's a chance to avoid financial disaster. Let's not forget about the practical side of things. Diesel trucks are the backbone of the trucking industry right now. The infrastructure for zero-emission vehicles just isn't there yet. Charging stations are few and far between, and the technology is still evolving. By sticking with diesel trucks for now, businesses can avoid the headache of trying to make an early and expensive switch. Small and medium-sized companies especially are relieved. These are the folks who would have been hit hardest by the cost of compliance. Of course, there's another side to this story. Environmentalists aren't thrilled. They've been fighting for cleaner air and stricter emission standards for years. They argue that pulling back on these rules is a step in the wrong direction for California's climate goals. But for the trucking industry, this decision is a welcome break from the constant pressure to go green overnight. It's a complicated situation. But one thing's for sure, this announcement has changed the game for everyone involved. The trucking industry wasted no time reacting to CARB's announcement. Many drivers and fleet owners were quick to share their thoughts, and most of them were positive. Some called it a win for common sense, while others saw it as a choice to finally catch their breath.
That all trucks had to be zero emission by 2036.
A former CARB board member for 16 years, Daniel Sperling helped develop the rule and believed there were problems with it.
Let's face it, the transition to zero-emission vehicles was always going to be a massive undertaking. Many in the industry felt it was unrealistic, especially for smaller operators who couldn't afford to overhaul their fleets. Now, they have the breathing room to focus on what matters most, running their businesses without the looming threat of a government mandate. On the other hand, environmental groups weren't shy about voicing their disappointment. For years, they've been pushing for stricter emission standards to tackle air pollution and climate change. CARB's withdrawal felt like a major setback to them. Some activists even accused the agency of giving into political pressure rather than standing firm on its commitment to clean air. They worry the decision will slow progress and make it harder to meet long-term climate goals. Politically, the reactions were just as divided. Democrats, especially in California, expressed concerns over the rollback and what it might mean for the state's leadership in environmental policies. Republicans, however, saw it as a victory for businesses and common sense. With Trump back in office, it's clear that federal and state policies are once again clashing, creating uncertainty for the future. The mix of relief, frustration, and political debate makes this story even more compelling. Everyone has an opinion, and the ripple effects of this decision are only just beginning to unfold. So where does California go from here? CARB might have to hit the brakes on the Advanced Clean Fleets rule, but that doesn't mean they're giving up on clean air entirely. This could be the start of a new strategy. Instead of forcing a one-size-fits-all solution, CARB might focus on more gradual and flexible approaches. Maybe they'll work on building the infrastructure first, like installing more charging stations, before expecting the industry to make the switch. They could also invest in research to make zero-emission vehicles cheaper and more accessible. It's not the end of the road, it's just a detour. So what are your thoughts on this? Let us know in the comments below.